Throughout the Second World War, there were many execution methods used to take the lives of millions of innocent civilians and people. Under the guise of the conflict, there were many horrific war crimes carried out, and different governments sought to inflict slaughter on so many people. There were groups of people who were sent to concentration camps, where they were driven into the gas chambers, and also within sites such as Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen and Stutthof, there were gallows used to bring the lives of many people to an end. But one of the most prolific execution methods used during the war was the death squads, who shot millions of people inside German-occupied lands. After the advancement of the Wehrmacht in the German armed forces, a set of executioners followed, and they rounded up civilians and then committed so many war crimes that still today many of these people's stories lay under the ground and have been untold. Welcome to the Fortress. Today we look at the execution method of the killing pits of World War II, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The Einsatzgruppen were sets of SS death squads and executioners who were responsible for the mass murder by shooting of civilians and victims of the Nazi policies during World War II. Following the invasion of Poland, the group were put to work, and they rounded up people after the Germans rampaged into the lands, and they organised executions. The most prominent method of killing was using large pits, which also became the graves for millions of people. The group were under the direction of the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, and was supervised by the Butcher of Prague, Reinhard Heydrich, and they worked with other Nazi groups to carry out as efficient slaughter as they could. When it came to other war crimes and executions of civilians, killing pits were used a lot during the conflict, as they were then used to become the graves which were covered over. Usually with these sorts of executions, the armed forces would advance, and then the Einsatzgruppe arrived and categorised and sorted the population of the newly conquered lands. Those who were then rounded up and were marked for death were then taken to a clearing, normally on the edge of a village, town or settlement. These first victims were the ones who were ordered to dig the pit, and they would then be the ones who dug the graves in which hundreds more bodies would then be interred inside of. Following the digging of these deep pits, usually the victims were led into the pit in groups. There were two different methods of execution deployed by the SS within the pit. One of the most common was to use a sole executioner who worked in shifts with other men. The victims were ordered into the pit, and they would be often standing on the bodies of those who went before them, and these people were then ordered to lie down on the bodies of those who went before. The SS executioner then came up behind them and administered a single gunshot in the nape of the neck with a pistol or rifle, and this was known as Genickschuss or neck shooting. The SS realised that they could use one executioner for the killings instead of firing squads, but these were also deployed when there were many to be killed at once with more haste, as the firing squad would stand on the edge of the pit, and they would then fire into the victims when they were ordered to do so. This was the method in which millions of people were killed all across occupied lands during the Second World War. There were some harrowing accounts of people who did survive the killing pits, and they, once the dirt had been piled on the bodies on top of them, did manage to scramble out playing dead. This was rare, but after the executions had taken place, the SS men then made extensive efforts to conceal their crimes. The land was recorded by the SS as being a site of a major war crime, and often trees were planted over the graves to hide what had happened. But there were examples later of groups of men being forced by the SS to dig up the dead corpses and then burn them in huge pyres, reducing the remains to ashes, which were then buried. Inside of a forest a few years ago in Poland, the remains of roughly 8,000 victims of the Nazis and the Soldau concentration camp were found. There were roughly 17 tons of ashes discovered, and these had been the people who were killed in execution pits, who were dug up and then cremated. They even found some possessions from the deceased. There were some huge-scale massacres carried out during the war, with thousands being executed in a matter of days, and this was systematic slaughter on an industrial scale. But sadistically, the Nazis even made arrangements for some of their executioners, as they were concerned about the mental toll of being responsible for thousands of people's deaths and what this was doing to the minds of the gunmen. Many of the killing pits of the Second World War are still undiscovered today, as the Nazis aimed to hide and conceal the remains of their victims. They managed to hide many of their crimes and made big attempts to do so, but there were some who at the end of the war were condemned for their involvements in the executions. Every year victims of the Nazis are being discovered, and their stories are being told 80 years after the deadliest conflict in human history came to an end. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.